This is the briefing for Wednesday, September 24th. Before I get started with the briefing, got a couple housekeeping items to take care of. First one is I will be out of the office tomorrow and Friday, so there will not be a briefing, at least a recorded briefing, tomorrow or Friday. The next recorded briefing will be on Monday. If there is something that is significant that happens during the market hours, I will send out a email with some type of written analysis, but I will not be able to do a recording analysis because I'll be traveling for both those days. The other thing is that it was brought to my attention that I had a typo on my chart, and I certainly did, and did not even recognize it because I was looking more at the numbers or looking more at the chart patterns instead of the numbers. But as you remember, in the last couple of briefings, I had the 661.75 up for support in the spiders, and I had this 593.25 up for support in the Qs. But unfortunately, I had a typo here. It was 393.25 was my typo, so I have changed it back and I corrected this. And I appreciate being updated that I had an incorrect title here, being this 593.25. But as you can see, they turned out to be pretty good because we had this 661.75. We got this rotation just below it, which it was a pause just below it. In the Qs, the 593.25 came right down to it, as you can see there, and then bounced off of it. And then, of course, in the IWM, we had 243.75 initial. We had this rotation around it, then started to sell off through it at the open today, and then continued to sell off, trading down to close to the 241 area, which was the next level of support. Now, I want to point out something else here. And as you know, if you've been listening to the briefings, I've been talking about just the general indications I get from market development and the market structure, is that the rally was very, very tired, and that I felt like we would see some type of a counter trend rotation or something that would relieve the price development to some degree, based on the fact that the internals were not supporting the rally. In fact, were diverging and declining as price was trying to move higher. So that's basically what we got in yesterday's trading and in today's trading. Now, as technical traders, as technicians, we look for chart patterns because they do repeat themselves. And as you know, at least our longer term subscribers know that one of the things I look for in counter trend rotations is equality between the rotation. Now, it can happen in a pause phase where you get something like this, which is just an up and down movement, and then a breakout of either the upper extreme or the lower extreme, or it can happen in a three-step counter trend rotation. And it just so happens that this looked like it developed into a three-step counter trend rotation. Now, I did the numbers on this, and if this is true, if this is correct, if the chart pattern is correct, then we should potentially see some type of rotation back to the upside in tomorrow's trading. Now, if you take the distance between this leg here, between the high and the low here, and then measure and find out what that distance is, and then subtract it from this high here, you get a projection for the end of this third leg. In other words, there should be equality between the first leg and the third leg. Doesn't happen all the time, but a high percentage of the time it happens. It projected that this leg should end in the 659.30 area. It actually ended, this low was 659.57, which was only 27 cents away from the projection. So you can see that worked out pretty good. Now, today's low is going to be important support for tomorrow. If that's broken, then this is not a three-step counter trend rotation, and this is developing into something more complex that typically would suggest that we're going to see much lower prices in the coming 2 days of trading that are left. in terms of the Qs, it's the same thing. You can see here, you can see this high, the distance from here to here, and then subtracting it from this high here projects the Qs down to 594.01. This low actually came in at 593.36, a difference of 65 cents before we saw this bounce off this 593.25 area, and then this pause or the rotation. And then finally in the IWM, you can see the three-step counter trend rotation. It projected the ending of this third leg should come in right around the 240.87 area. It actually ended in the 241.56 area in today's trading, a difference of only 69 cents. So while the numbers aren't exact, they do project an area which is very important in determining whether this is a three-step counter trend rotation. Now, the good part for the spiders and the Qs are it didn't close at the low of the day, but you can see that the IWM closed at the low of the day, so it's going to be very interesting to see how we open up in tomorrow's trading. So tomorrow's trading, watch today's lows very, very carefully, because if we break those lows and the internals are weaker than they were in today's trading, then that suggests that this is not a three-step counter trend rotation. It's complete, and something else is in the process of happening, which I will analyze at that point in time. And you can see here that in the spiders, even though we've had this pretty good move here, breadth, S&P breadth has declined somewhat, but in today's trading it was only negative 62 shares. So it's still fairly strong for this type of a move. In the Qs, you can see it was 674 shares negative, which is still not very strong to the downside or weakness that would suggest that this is going to continue. And then in the IWM, it was 379 shares that were negative in market breadth in the Russell. So basically what I'm going to be looking for tomorrow is if we break these lows, are we going to see the internals falling off also? They have to be weaker than they were in today's trading. If they're not, and we do get a lower low, which I would think potentially we might see something higher in the spiders and the Qs, something lower in the IWM, maybe testing this 241 area. And then, of course, if the internals are stronger than they were in today's trading, that would suggest some type of rotation back to the upside. Key tomorrow is the low from today. That is for sure. And then comparing that with what's happening with the internals. And you can see net volume in the NYSE was negative. Net volume in the NASDAQ was basically positive, but not very positive. And it was negative in the IWM as well. So tomorrow is going to be a very important day in determining whether this is three steps and done and we're going back up, or whether this is developing into something even more complex and we're going to see some type of move down to much lower support levels. In terms of being overbought and oversold, we are basically still neutral, as you can see there, so it does not preclude the market from having to work off an overbought or oversold condition. Going to be a very interesting day tomorrow. I'll be here part of the time in the morning, and hopefully I'll see some type of a decent move and be able to maybe even comment on this without a recording in tomorrow's trading. Have a great night, and I'll see you Monday, if not before.